How's everybody doing tonight? Right on. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me this evening. Can't wait to share this story with you. But before I do, there's always a couple things that I like to say by way of introduction, okay, to tonight and to the story that you're about to hear. And I believe that these two things, if you hear them, if you apply them, they are going to help you hear the story, perhaps, if you're familiar with it. They're going to help you maybe hear the story like you've never heard it before. And if you aren't really familiar with the biblical narrative, they're going to help you hear the story the way I believe it is intended to be heard, okay? So the first thing that I want to say before we jump into 7 Mile Story is this. The Bible is the most incredible book on planet Earth. Okay? And I say that, and I want you to know this. My footnote to that statement is this. You do not have to share my faith in the Bible tonight to agree with that statement, okay? I'm laying all my cards on the table. For me, the Bible, inspired word of the one true living God. I build my life and my faith upon it. But if you're here tonight and you do not share that, that is A-okay, and I am so glad a neighbor or friend dragged you here tonight. I think you are going to still have a great time. But now let me quickly explain why logically you should agree with that statement, okay? In order to explain, I need to tell you a quick story, and we got to travel back in time to when I was younger. So, okay, there we go, okay? Grade 12 Ross, all right? Grade 12 Ross in all his glory. When I was in grade 12, I had an English teacher, and my English teacher had our class do a writing assignment. We came into class, and she said, okay, class, today you are all collectively going to be authors of a short story. You're all going to get a turn to write part of what is going to be a short story. So we all got our turn. The only catch was, when it came your time to write, you were only allowed to read the last sentence the person before you wrote. But with that guidance, you would continue and write the story. So we all got our turn. At the end of it, my teacher grabs this big piece of paper. She brings it to the front of the classroom, and she reads a story that you wouldn't believe it. It went on to actually become fire. Like it was a dumpster fire. It was garbage. No, it didn't. Like it's not a child's story that you know. It was horrendous. Like we could barely piece together 2 paragraphs that flowed and made sense. Now I'm telling you that little story because I just want to tell you the facts behind our attempt to write a story in that manner that day. Okay? That story was written in one classroom in one day in a classroom of roughly 24 students. Most of us had known each other since grade 1. Okay? When we wrote, we used the same alphabet, the same language, the same vernacular and slang. We knew that our mission was to write one coherent story. And even though it was only one sentence, we were allowed to read a little bit of what had previously been written in order to help us successfully achieve this goal. And we couldn't do it. The reason I share that story with you is because now I want to share facts behind the writing of the Bible. Okay? These are not things that people need to believe by faith. There are people teaching world religion in universities around this world, and they would not bat an eye at any of the statements I'm about to make, okay? So, facts about the Bible. The first one, in case you didn't know, the Bible is not one book. The Bible is actually the collection of 66 individual books. Those 66 individual books were written by over 30 different authors who would end up using 3 different languages as they wrote. The time frame from the oldest book in the Bible to the one that's the closest to us on the world calendar is 1,500 years. These books are spread out by 1,500 years. The location where they were written is spread out by hundreds of kilometers. Multiple continents is where these books were written. At times, in the story you are going to hear tonight, there were individuals writing at the same time as one another in different locations, not comparing notes, completely oblivious that someone else was writing. And at times, the story you're going to hear tonight, individuals who wrote books that are now in the Bible, they did not know what had previously been written in order to guide them into success. Yet, despite all of that, when these 66 books are eventually put together to give us the book we call the Bible, you get one seamless, fluid, unbroken narrative that constantly points in the same direction, carries the same theme, and ultimately fulfills itself. That should be impossible. I have yet to find one single book or story that has been composed in the manner in which the Bible has been. In fact, when you look at those facts about the Bible, I think it kind of points you into thinking and wondering, the only way that's possible, really, is if there was one person guiding and inspiring the writing the whole time. But I will leave that up to you to decide. The second thing that I want to say before we jump into the event this evening is this, and this is really a challenge for every single person here tonight, and the challenge is this. Will you let this story tell itself? Let the story tell itself. Now, if that doesn't make sense, I'll explain it this way. Imagine you guys all came here tonight because you heard Ross Breitkreitz was coming to town and he was going to be sharing Romeo and Juliet with you, okay? So you guys all showed up and I'm sharing Romeo and Juliet with you as it has been given to us from Mr. Shakespeare. And for whatever the reason is, I don't need to know, I tell you about the aspect of the story that tells us that there's these two families, there's the Montagues and the Capulets, and they hate each other and their houses are at war with one another. And you hear that and you stop and you go, I don't like that. I don't like the thought of two families fighting. It makes me feel uncomfortable. So I'm taking that out of the story. That's not true of my Romeo and Juliet. And then you try to listen to the rest of the story. Do you know what you just did? You robbed yourself of actually experiencing what that story is communicating. You robbed yourself, you drained yourself of the opportunity to ever experience and understand like the forbiddenness of their love. Guys, you can't do that to Romeo and Juliet. Guys, you can't do that to the Bernstein Bears. You cannot pick and choose parts when you are hearing a story or even watching one on TV. So my challenge to you tonight is, will you be brave enough, even if it is just for this evening, to let this story tell itself? Because if you are, I firmly believe that you are about to encounter the greatest story that you have ever heard. And with those two things out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to begin our 7-mile story. And our story begins sitting down, opening up this book, and we read the opening lines of "In the Beginning." Now, I understand that that might be anticlimactic, because there's a good chance, even if you didn't grow up in the church or around the Bible, you probably know the Bible begins with those words, "in the beginning." But I want us to pause. Now, I also want to comfort you all. This is not the pace I move through the entire book, okay? Even though we're 3 words in and I'm stopping, that's not the rhythm for the whole night. But we need to. Because sometimes, because we're over familiar with something, we overlook. And I know I did this with the Bible for years. And I want us to really contemplate, like, in the beginning of what? Absolutely everything. This is before the world. This is before light. This is before plants. This is the birthplace of everything. In fact, the Bible starts with this really awesome and bold claim. This is the birthplace of every single story that has ever been told. And what I like to view as the blankest canvas that there has ever been. And upon this blank canvas, an author is about to speak. The Bible refers to this author as God. But as he does, everything we now know bursts into life. Light, plants, animals, molecules, the laws of physics we're still abiding by today, burst onto the scene and come to life at the voice of this creator, our author, God. That's what the story tells us. But what the story also wants us to know is that nothing he created was by accident. There was an intentionality behind everything God created. There was a purpose behind his design. This was not just thrown together. In fact, I think the way we can view God's act of creation, we can view it quite similar to what happens when a couple or parents discover that they are expecting their first child. This is something that they often do for their first child. And you know what? Maybe they would even go out of their way to do this for the second, but usually the third doesn't get it, right? Ross doesn't get the same celebration as Adam and Aaron. And now you know my birth order, the name of my older siblings, and that I'm going to counseling to deal with some issues. But what do expectant parents often do is, if they have the space in their house, maybe if it's in their budget, if they can upgrade their home, they're going to prepare a baby room, right? They find out they're going to have a little baby coming home. They're going to get a baby room ready. They're going to get a nursery prepared. Now, here's the thing. You could make an award-winning nursery. Like you could, if you could also afford it, fly Chip and Joanna up here, okay? Show them your Pinterest dream board. Have them bang out the best baby room that has ever been created. But here is the reality. No matter how incredible that baby room is, and it might be good, it is never going to reach its intended purpose until the one it was created for enters into it. then that baby room would likely shift from good to very good. This is what happens with creation. God furnishes the earth, and throughout the days of creation, he says, oh, this is good. But it's not until mankind enters into it that he places them there, creates them and places them there. He goes, now this creation is very good. This wants to communicate to us that we are set apart. We, mankind, men and women, we are unlike anything else God creates. This is what the story wants us to know. And it explains this also to us through its language. Previously, God spoke, it came into existence. When it comes time for mankind, the language shifts. It uses language like he molds us, he forms us, he knits us together, and it has this intimate scene and image of it says he breathes breath into their lungs. And then the Bible goes even further and it tells us this. It says that we have been created in the image of God. Now, that is a sentence that you could unpack for the rest of your life. But for the sake of this evening, what I want us to understand about being created in the image of God, it means this. It means we've been created to know him, to love him, and to reveal him. But ultimately, we have been created to be in relationship with God. This is what the story tells us. Mankind's been created to be in relationship with God. Now, what I want us to understand is that this also means at our very core, according to this story, what it means to be human is that we are deeply relational beings. Now, if you are here tonight and you don't share my faith in the Bible, I still believe this is a point that you and I can agree on. Because no matter how young or old you are, through your human experience, you have discovered that you long for relationship, friendship, connectivity. In fact, scientists and psychologists in more recent years have come to the conclusion that human connectivity and relationship is as an essential of a need as food and water for us. And I don't know if you've heard this, but I also discovered through research that the worst, if there is a war and you are captured and you are a prisoner of war, the worst form of torture that you can be exposed to doesn't have anything to do with mutilation of the human body. It's simply isolation. We are deeply connected people. We long for relationship, and this story will tell us that all of that longing and need for connection and relationship will only ever ultimately, that hunger will only ever be quenched fully in a relationship with God. So God creates mankind, he creates men and women, and he creates them for a relationship with himself. So it starts off pretty good for mankind. And then God takes mankind, and what he does is he places them into this place, and it's called the Garden of Eden. He places them in this beautiful garden. Now, we are allowed to do some audience participation this evening. Show of hands. Has anyone ever tried to visualize or picture the Garden of Eden in their life? Yeah, okay, a couple. Like when I was younger, I was like fixated on trying to figure out what this looked like, and I came to the conclusion it might have been like a hybrid between scenes from like Avatar and Lord of the Rings, right? Like, it's probably somewhere in there is what I think the garden looked like. But I've now come to discover that the actual beauty, although I'm sure topographically it was stunning, don't doubt that, the true beauty of the garden isn't how it looked, it's actually the life that it represents. See, because the garden represents perfect life on earth. Now I understand that it would be easier, I think, to picture what it looked like then imagine perfect life on earth, because unfortunately the world that we live in is so broken, it can be hard to even imagine such a thing. But I believe with all of my heart that every single person in the room here tonight, I believe with all my heart, every single person on planet Earth, you may have never verbalized it this way to yourself, but I believe every single one of you has actually hungered for that garden. You've longed for it. You might not have known it, but I honestly think you have. In order to explain why I believe this, we're just going to talk about pain really, really quickly. And first we're going to talk about physical pain, okay? And the only thing I want you to know about physical pain is this. On its most basic foundational level, physical pain is doing one thing. It's communicating a truth. And that truth is something's not working the way that it's supposed to. That's what physical pain is. So like, let's just, for an example, let's say you were in elementary school and you were a soccer goaltender and you dove for the ball and you missed the ball, but the guy trying to kick the ball also missed the ball, but he met your middle finger with his cleat. And your middle finger ends up where a watch face classically would be, okay? I know a guy that happened to. Now, imagine what's going to happen is your brain, you're going to receive a message and it sounds like ow, right? You're feeling this message. This is Al. But what's the whole point of Al? Is to get you to pay attention and go, hey, look, something is one way and it's not supposed to be that way. Something's wrong, something's off. This is true of physical pain, right down from a broken bone to maybe even an upset stomach. I mean, that could be gas station sushi that you trusted, but either way, physical pain is trying to tell you something isn't the way that it's supposed to be. And we all agree. I see heads nodding all around the room. What about emotional pain? Because I think the same truth applies. And we don't always take emotional pain even to that level. I understand. I'm not saying my story's beyond or deeper or worse than anyone's story here. I'm just saying that I relate and understand to emotional pain better than I would like to. Because I tried to run for years. See, I had a season in my life where I was in a horrific car accident, and as a result of this car accident, I suffered brain damage, which my wife says makes so much sense, but as a result of my brain damage, the area of my brain that received it actually was in control of my chemical balances, and I was thrust into what doctors referred to as a clinical depression for a number of years. And I wanted to run and I wanted to hide, but it was through the depths of that season that I came to land on this truth that I want to share with you tonight. That I firmly believe every time we experience pain, and not just emotional pain, but even, and you guys know, I don't need to give you a list. You can probably think of them right now. You know those emotions you just want to puke out? The ones you wish you never had to feel? The ones that make you just sit there and wish, like, I wish this didn't have to be this way. I wish the world didn't have to feel like this. I wish I didn't have to feel like this, or maybe even I wish I didn't do that thing. Whatever it is, we all know those emotions. What is that inside of us that keeps sending up a signal going, something's foreign, something seems wrong? Why does this seem so off? Why do I here, living this life, long for something so different? I believe that's because deep inside of us, our bodies know we actually weren't intended to hurt and suffer that way. We were created and intended to be in that perfect garden. When we hurt, we don't just hurt for the sake of hurting. We are longing for that garden. And I would venture to say the time you've wanted your life to be the most different was the time that you hurt the deepest. And if anyone ever came to my hometown and wanted to see, I could take you right into the hospital room within a 5-foot radius of exactly where that moment took place in my life. And it was on a night over 10 years ago where I stood in that room, and with this hand, I held my mother's as she took her last breath on this earth. And the tears were streaming down my cheeks, and my heart was being ripped open in front of me. And it felt foreign. Like, it feels wrong. It is wrong to lose your mother when you're only 27 years old. That's how it felt. But I firmly believe what I've discovered from that day, that keeping and staying with my mom wasn't some pie in the sky pipe dream. It was actually this longing that actually was never supposed to be something that I had to endure. In that moment, I wasn't sad. I was homesick. For the place this story tells us, God created us and placed us in. This story begins with mankind put into a situation that you have likely wanted to experience or taste in your life. It starts off great. Like, for mankind, for humans, this story starts off really fabulous. But then something strange happens. God puts a tree in this garden. It's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it's really his only one request. He goes, hey, and from this tree you shall not eat, for when you do, surely you will die. Now, let me just say this. The Bible, in my opinion, could have been so much shorter. Don't put the tree in. Replace that tree with a sentence that says, and they lived happily ever after. Lock us in. I could proudly stand here and say, I have the whole Bible memorized. But that's not what happens. He puts this tree in the garden. But as weird as it can sound, and there have been times where I'm like, man, don't put it in there. Just lock us in. Put this whole story on cruise control. He puts the tree in the garden, and we all know why. And the truth is this. It's because real, genuine, sincere love, which this story will communicate, that's what God desires. He desires genuine hearts, and a sincere love always requires a choice. It always requires a choice. That's the thing that makes something like a proposal so like electrifying, exciting, and slightly scary, right? Like when I proposed to my wife, we had this like moment, and I was pretty sure she was going to say yes, But she did have a choice. Could you imagine if she didn't? Could you imagine if, like, where I proposed to her, all of a sudden, as I said, like, Brittany, will you marry me? And like 10 henchmen jump out with AKs. And they're like, listen, lady, there's only one way this goes. I would have every reason to question the sincerity of her love for me. Real, genuine, sincere love always requires a choice, even if that choice is extremely simple. And in my opinion, this choice for Adam and Eve, mindlessly simple. Whole world, unbroken, perfect. They're walking in perfect community with God, have that relationship that they've been created to have. They got it all. One tree? One tree. Do you know how many other trees he made? This one tree should be a complete non-factor in my mind. I am so ignorant. I like to think if you could somehow tag me into this story, I'd at least get you 30, 40 chapters before this went awry. This one tree should seem so insignificant in light of everything else. This is how simple and clear and obvious I feel like the decision should have been for them. It would be like if I came to you all tonight and I said, hey, tomorrow, guys, we're all going bungee jumping, all right? You only have one choice to make. It's a really simple one. When you jump tomorrow, just let me know. Would you like to jump with or without the cord? That's not a hard choice. Which is why it should shock us that almost from the text, instantaneously, that's not what they do. They eat from this tree. They go and eat from this tree, and what they're doing is they're going against God's will, which the Bible will refer to as sin. And the second they do this, three things cement themselves into this narrative, three things that weren't going to be cemented into this story like they are now, and that is Satan, sin, and death. And sin is going to prove to be an unstoppable plague, threatening to destroy mankind. And the sad thing is A, there is nothing mankind can do in their own efforts to deal with this sin issue. Nothing. And B, they are instantly torn away from that one relationship that they have been created to have. Now, I have one more challenge for you tonight, and this one really goes out to anyone who knows the Bible, knows how big the Bible is, and is maybe sweating because we're only in Genesis 3, we're 20 minutes in, and you're wondering if I'll make it, okay? I've done this once or twice, we're gonna make it, okay? But my challenge for you is this: would you, for the best and to the best of your abilities, hear this story as if you have no idea what's coming? Hear this story as if I'm giving it to you one page at a time. Maybe even picture this. Picture you're at home and your computer printer comes to life and it starts spitting out pages and you're like, oh, look at this, it's a story. And you start reading it. And so far, your computer printer has printed out everything that I've just divulged to you, all right? You've read the story, you've read there in this garden, you've read that they go against God's will and they eat from this tree. And the printer pauses. If the printer then printed out one page, and all it said was, and God said to them, you made your bed, now lie in it. And that was the end of the story. Would you be shocked? I'm telling you, I would not be shocked, because here's the reality. What does God owe them? We need to pause and sit in this moment and not just gloss over it and understand that He does not have to respond in any particular way to what they just did. He does not owe them anything, and He'd be fully justified to walk away and leave them to their own devices. This is why we should be blown away that that's not what He does. It should astound us that rather than doing that, which is something that as a human I might expect, He goes in pursuit of them. He goes looking for His broken creation. And when He does, He makes a promise. And through some seemingly confusing words in Genesis 3:15, He says this. He says, I promise that I'm going to send a seed of woman. He's saying that there's going to be a child. A child is coming that He is going to provide. And what He is saying through this promise is that He is promising to send one through the line of mankind who is going to be the answer and the solution to Satan, sin, and death. And from this moment on, here's what the Bible is, in my opinion. It is a story of God's relentless pursuit of His broken creation that cannot fix itself. And from Genesis 3:15 forward, our story absolutely erupts.